You only write that song once. You know, you can only write it once. I can't ever use that drum machine again, and I can't ever have that sound, really.
The year is 1985. Phil Collins, riding high on the success of No Jacket Required, is the king of pop rock. His face is plastered across MTV. His songs dominate the airwaves, and it seems like he can do no wrong. Fast forward to today. The drums have fallen silent. The voice that once filled arenas now struggles to be heard, and the man who seemed to have it all is fighting just to hold on to what's left. What really happened to Phil Collins? The answer lies in a tale of soaring highs and crushing lows, where the beat of the drum becomes the ticking of a countdown clock. From Genesis to solo superstardom, Collins seemed unstoppable. But behind the chart-topping hits and sold-out shows lurked demons that would threaten to destroy everything he'd built. Addiction, failed marriages, career-threatening injuries. The man who once asked us to take a look at me now was about to show us a side we never expected to see. How did the drummer-turned-frontman go from another day in paradise to a personal hell? What drove him to the brink of giving up the very music that defined him? And can Phil Collins, the man who once seemed to have the Midas touch, find his rhythm again in a world that's moved on without him? This is the story of Phil Collins' invisible battle, the one fought far from the spotlight. It's a journey that will make you question everything you thought you knew about one of rock's most enduring icons. So sit back, turn up the volume, and prepare to discover what really happened to Phil Collins. Rise to fame. Picture this: a skinny kid from West London sitting behind a drum kit, dreaming of the big time. That was Phil Collins, circa 1970. Little did he know, he was about to embark on a journey that would take him from the back of the stage to the very front, and beyond. Collins' big break came when he answered an ad in Melody Maker for a drummer. The band? Genesis. But this wasn't the Genesis we'd come to know. This was Peter Gabriel's Genesis, theatrical, complex, and decidedly not mainstream. Collins fit right in, his intricate drumming providing the backbone for the band's progressive sound. But fate had other plans for our drummer boy. In 1975, Gabriel left the band, and Genesis found themselves without a frontman. The solution was closer than anyone realized. During the audition process, Collins would sing the songs to show candidates how they went. And then it hit them. Why look elsewhere when the perfect voice was right there? Just like that, the drummer became the singer. But could he pull it off? The first show with Collins as lead singer was a baptism by fire. He gripped the microphone, heart pounding, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. But as soon as he opened his mouth, magic happened. The crowd went wild, and a star was born. Genesis soared to new heights with Collins at the helm. But he wasn't content with just one success story. In 1981, while still with Genesis, he released his first solo album, Face Value. The lead single, In the Air Tonight, with its iconic drum break, became an instant classic. Suddenly, Phil Collins wasn't just a rock star, he was a bona fide pop sensation. Hit after hit followed. Against All Odds, One More Night, Susudio. Collins couldn't miss. By the mid-'80s, he was everywhere. Solo tours, Genesis tours, Live Aid. The man was a machine. He even found time to dabble in acting, starring in the movie Buster. It seemed like Phil Collins had it all: fame, fortune, and a Midas touch when it came to making music. But as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for. The higher the climb, the harder the fall. And for Phil Collins, the fall was coming. As the '80s drew to a close, cracks began to show. The constant touring, the pressure to top himself with every release, the toll on his personal life, it was all building up. The drummer boy who became king was about to face his toughest battle yet, and this time, the enemy wasn't outside, it was within. Love and loss. For a man who wrote some of the most heart-wrenching love songs of his generation, Phil Collins seemed to have a hard time finding lasting love in his own life. His journey through romance reads like a rock and roll soap opera, with each chapter more dramatic than the last. Collins' first marriage was to Andrea Bertarelli in 1975. They'd been sweethearts since they were 11, reconnecting as adults. It seemed like a fairy tale. The childhood friends turned lovers. But the happily ever after was short-lived. As Genesis skyrocketed to fame, the marriage crumbled under the weight of Collins' growing stardom. The divorce hit Collins hard. he channeled his pain into his first solo album, Face Value. The raw emotion in tracks like In the Air Tonight resonated with millions. Collins had turned his heartbreak into hit records, but at what cost? Enter Jill Tavelman, Collins' second wife. They married in 1984, right as Collins' solo career was exploding. For a while, it seemed like Collins had found his balance. Successful career, stable marriage. They had a daughter, Lily, and life was good. But the demons of fame and fortune were never far away. As the 90s rolled in, cracks began to show. Collins's constant touring and workaholic tendencies strained the relationship. Then came the infamous fax incident. Tabloids reported that Collins had ended his marriage via fax, a claim he vehemently denied. But the damage was done. The divorce was messy, public, and costly. Collins later reflected, "I don't think I'm easy to live with. I'm not the easiest person to live with, and that's probably why I've been married 3 times." It was a moment of rare self-awareness from a man often accused of being emotionally tone-deaf. But Collins wasn't done with love just yet. In 1999, he married Orianne Sevi, a translator he'd met on tour. They had 2 sons together, and for a while, it seemed like Collins had finally found his happy ending. But once again, fate had other plans. In 2006, Collins and Sevi divorced. The settlement was eye-watering, £25 million, the largest in British celebrity divorce history at the time. Collins was left reeling, both emotionally and financially. The toll of these failed relationships was evident in Collins' music. Albums like Both Sides and Testify were filled with songs of heartbreak and regret. The man who once sang "You Can't Hurry Love" seemed to be learning that lesson the hard way. But just when everyone thought Collins' love life was over, a plot twist worthy of a Hollywood movie occurred. In 2016, Collins announced he was back together with Sevi. "We realized we missed each other," he said. It seemed like a heartwarming comeback story. However, this rekindled romance would prove to be yet another chapter in Collins' tumultuous love life, leading to more drama and heartache. The man who had soundtracked millions of love stories was still struggling to write his own happy ending. As Collins navigated these personal upheavals, one question loomed large. Could the man who wrote Against All Odds beat the odds in his own life? Or was he destined to remain a witness to love rather than its lifelong recipient? The drummer's paradox. Phil Collins, pop icon, chart topper, and underrated drummer? It sounds like a paradox, but for Collins, it was a reality that dogged him throughout his career. How could a man considered one of the greatest drummers of his generation be simultaneously dismissed as a lightweight pop star? The roots of this paradox lie in Collins' early days with Genesis. As the band's drummer, he was revered for his technical skill and innovative style. His work on tracks like Dance on a Volcano and Los Endos showcased a musician at the top of his game. Collins wasn't just keeping time, he was pushing boundaries. But then came the shift. When Peter Gabriel left Genesis, Collins stepped up to the microphone. Suddenly, the man behind the kit was front and center. Genesis evolved, moving from progressive rock to more radio-friendly pop. And Collins. He became a bona fide pop star. His solo career only amplified this transformation. Hits like Susudio and Another Day in Paradise dominated the airwaves. Collins was everywhere, on MTV, on movie soundtracks, even in Disney animated films. But as his pop star status grew, something else began to fade. Recognition of his drumming skills. Critics sharpened their knives. They accused Collins of selling out, of abandoning his roots for commercial success. The very qualities that made him a pop sensation, his accessible melodies, his everyman image, were used as evidence of his supposed lack of depth. Collins found himself caught in a trap of his own making. The more successful he became as a pop artist, the more his reputation as a serious musician seemed to suffer. It was as if the world couldn't reconcile the idea of Phil Collins, pop star, with Phil Collins, drumming virtuoso. This dichotomy wasn't lost on Collins. In interviews, he often expressed frustration at being pigeonholed. "I'm a drummer first and a singer second," he'd insist. But the public perception was hard to shake. The internal conflict took its toll. Collins began to second-guess himself. Was he betraying his musical roots? Had success come at too high a price? These questions nagged at him, even as he continued to fill stadiums and top charts. Ironically, while the public might have forgotten Collins' drumming prowess, his peers never did. Rock legends like Led Zeppelin's John Bonham and The Who's Keith Moon praised his skills, but for Collins, this respect from fellow musicians only highlighted the gap between his self-image and his public persona. As the years went on, Collins tried to bridge this divide. He reunited with Genesis, reminding the world of his progressive rock roots. He released instrumental albums that showcased his drumming. But the paradox persisted. In the end, Phil Collins found himself in an impossible position. Too pop for the rock purists, too complex for the pop fanatics. The drummer's paradox became a defining feature of his career, a constant tension between artistry and accessibility. But perhaps this very contradiction is what makes Collins unique. In straddling two worlds, he created something entirely his own. The question remains, will history remember Phil Collins as the pop star, the drummer, or both? Physical toll of rock stardom. Rock stardom comes at a price, and for Phil Collins, the bill came due in the form of devastating health issues. The man who once commanded stages with boundless energy found himself battling a body that seemed determined to betray him. The first blow came in 2000 when Collins lost hearing in his left ear. For a musician, this was nothing short of catastrophic. Imagine trying to create intricate rhythms or harmonies when you can only hear in mono. But Collins, ever the fighter, pressed on. Then came the back problems. Years of hunching over drum kits and energetic performances had taken their toll. In 2007, Collins suffered a dislocated vertebra in his neck that left him unable to hold drumsticks. The very instrument that had defined his career was now beyond his reach. But the cruelest twist was yet to come. In 2009, Collins woke up one morning to find he couldn't move his foot. The diagnosis? Nerve damage in his spine, likely caused by years of poor posture while drumming. The condition left him barely able to walk, let alone perform. "I was going to stop drumming anyway," Collins said with bitter humor. "I would have liked to have come to that decision on my own." The physical limitations began to impact his mental health. Depression set in as Collins grappled with the loss of his identity as a performer. He turned to alcohol, exacerbating his health problems and creating a vicious cycle of pain and self-medication. In 2011, Collins announced his retirement from music. "I don't think anyone's going to miss me," he said, a stark contrast to the confident showman of years past. It seemed the physical toll had finally broken his spirit. But Collins wasn't done yet. Through sheer determination and extensive therapy, he began to regain some of his abilities. In 2015, he announced a comeback tour, aptly named Not Dead Yet. However, the road back was far from smooth. During the tour, Collins fell in his hotel room, hitting his head on a chair. The incident left him with stitches and forced him to postpone several shows. Today, Collins performs seated, a cane by his side. His son Nick often takes over drumming duties. It's a far cry from the dynamic performer of the 80s, but it's a testament to Collins' resilience. The physical toll of rock stardom has left its mark on Phil Collins. But in facing these challenges, he's shown a different kind of strength, one that might just be his most powerful performance yet. The price of success. As the 90s dawned, Phil Collins was on top of the world, but what happens when you reach the peak? For Collins, the only way was down, and the descent was steeper than anyone could have imagined. The first crack in the facade came with his personal life. In 1994, Collins' second marriage crumbled spectacularly. The tabloids had a field day with reports that he'd ended the relationship via fax. Collins denied it, but the damage was done. The man who'd crooned about love in countless hits was now painted as a cold-hearted cad. But the real demon lurking in the shadows was alcohol. Collins had always enjoyed a drink, but now it was becoming a crutch. "I started to drink, and I started to drink, and I started to drink," he later confessed. The occasional glass to take the edge off became a bottle, then two. Soon, Collins was spiraling into full-blown alcoholism. The drinking took its toll on his health. In 2000, he lost hearing in his left ear. Imagine that. A musician, unable to fully hear the very music that made him famous. It was a cruel twist of fate, but Collins' troubles were far from over. As his personal life unraveled, the music industry was changing too. The polished pop rock that had been Collins's bread and butter was falling out of fashion. Critics sharpened their knives, dismissing him as a relic of the 80s. The man who once couldn't miss now couldn't seem to catch a break. The pressure mounted. Collins found himself caught between his Genesis commitments and his solo career, stretched thin, trying to satisfy everyone. "I was really exhausted," he admitted. "I just didn't even know who I was anymore." Then came the physical toll. Years of drumming had left Collins with crippling back pain. In 2009, he underwent surgery to repair dislocated vertebrae in his neck. The operation left him unable to hold drumsticks or even stand for long periods. The beat that had defined his life was slipping away. In 2011, Collins announced his retirement from music. "I'm stopping so I can be a full-time father to my 2 young sons on a daily basis," he said. But many wondered, was this really a choice? Or had the music world moved on without him? As Collins retreated from the spotlight, the whispers grew louder. What had happened to the drummer turned superstar? Had the pressure finally broken him? Or was there more to the story than met the eye? The truth, as always, was more complex than anyone realized. Phil Collins's journey from the top of the charts to the brink of oblivion was far from over. The man who once sang, "I can feel it coming in the air tonight," was about to face his darkest hour. But would he find his way back to the light? The answer would surprise everyone, including Collins himself.